First up, we have the EMP grenade, which is a pretty solid grenade. I'm going to put this one into B tier. The EMP grenade doesn't really do damage to enemies. It's mostly there just to disrupt them, because once you throw it on an enemy, it can no longer use its special ability, assuming it's not already in the process of doing that. So bloats won't vomit, sirens won't scream, flesh pounds and scrakes won't rage, husks can't fire at you. Really good on Berserker, really good for the crowd. Doesn't really do much damage. It's pretty decent for teamwork though, so I'm going to put it into B tier. Then we have the Kroval, Berserker starting weapon or survivalist starting weapon. This one does decent damage, it hits fairly hard. I'm going to put this one into C tier. It actually does scale fairly well with upgrades, so it's not a bad option there. It's okay for blocking and parrying. If you can find it on the ground, it's pretty good for killing little guys. You're probably going to replace it with something, though, after a couple of waves. Even on the longer missions for Berserker, you'll probably get rid of it, because Berserker usually doesn't really hurt for money. Survivalist, it's still probably like C tier for them. It's actually okay on the weight. It's super cheap, so if you just want something to block and parry with or run faster, it's pretty good for them too. Not a bad option. Then we've got the nail gun. Nail gun I'm going to put right up into A tier. It is pretty solid. It's the first semi-automatic shotgun that you can get. Does good damage. The nails actually count as pierce, so you can get a little bit more damage on certain enemies. They can bounce and hit multiple enemies, which is great. It's super cost effective too if you want to rebuy nails. They're really, really cheap. You can either fire this one nail at a time or fire it in a shotgun mode. Shotgun mode is usually what I keep it in. It's actually pretty good on support as well. It is good on support. I was going to say survivalist. It is pretty good on survivalist too if you want an early shotgun, because it does count towards a faster reload since it is a support weapon as well. That's pretty nice. Still does good damage, still scales well. So yeah, I'd probably say it's also like A or B tier for survivalist as well. It's not bad on them at all. Katana honestly used to be one of the better weapons in the game, but recently it's really not that great. Mostly because it just gets outscaled by a lot of other weapons. It actually does scale fairly well with upgrades. It is a fun weapon to use, but I don't know. I think I'm going to put Katana D tier. It used to be a really, really good option on Berserker, but there's just been better options that have been added to the game to do its job kind of better. I don't think it was ever really like your primary weapon on Berserker, unless you wanted to use it that way, which I certainly did for some challenges. And it was fun. It's got a unique attack set. It's also got a unique move when you unsheath the blade, so that's kind of cool. It's just like a faster heavy attack. It's not too heavy and it's actually pretty cheap, but there's not really a reason to go for the Katana or the Kroval if you still want to be lightweight. And the main reason being is like this weapon, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. On Survivalist, it's actually okay because it does attack faster than the Kroval, and you're not as good in melee range as Berserker is with Survivalist. You're still quite good, but just not as good. I would say it's actually higher on Survivalist because of its low weight and fairly cheap. I would say it's like C or B tier for them. And it's actually not a terrible off-perk weapon either for other classes if you can just squeeze it in and you want something cheap that you can block and parry with better than your knife. Fire Axe is not much better than the Katana. Sometimes it's worse than the Katana too. Katana can clear up small things quicker. Fire Axe does more heavy attack damage. Its light attacks are okay. Block and parry is fine. Scaling's actually pretty good with it. But again, you probably don't need to upgrade the Kroval to the Fire Axe unless you just want high single target damage for bigger enemies, which is more for the later rounds, and you're probably going to have more money to deal with them then. It's an unnecessary upgrade, but I'm going to put it into C tier. It's like a side grade to the Kroval. For Survivalist, it's fine as well. It's basically the same as the Kroval. You're probably not going to buy it for that reason. Then we have the Road Redeemer. Road Redeemer actually got buffed in the latest patch. It's still not way great, but it is a little bit different than Katana because the Katana had basically the same exact things as the Road Redeemer, and they actually even gave it the Katana's stab, which is funny because it's actually better on the Road Redeemer. It weighs a little bit more than the Katana, which automatically makes it not that great. Still does blunt damage. It does heavy attack damage than the Katana, but not as much as like the Fire Axe. So if you want an in-between between the Katana, Kroval, and Fire Axe, this kind of works. But there's a couple reasons why you don't see people taking this, mostly because a lot of people don't have it. And secondly, it's just not that great of a weapon. I'm going to put this one into D tier too. I don't think it's really that much of an upgrade from the Kroval. Similar to the Fire Axe, at least this one hits really hard, so it kind of has that going for it, but even then it's still not amazing. Then we have the Hemoclobber. This is the Medic Bat. This one is a tier 3 weapon. This one allows you to heal allies and yourself with it. Its healing is fairly low now since that's been nerfed like 2 or 3 times. It's still lightweight, it still has an AoE damage, it still clears things up very quickly. With it just being so lightweight and the fact that it can heal people and just disrupt Zeds, it's going to be one of the most meta things for Berserker because it kind of beats out all these weapons if you just want a cheap, lightweight weapon. And it also comes with just like the crowd clear. Just the heal on top of it's kind of a bonus. The only reason I can see for them nerfing it as many times as they did is because they didn't understand what made it so strong. It's because it's lightweight, you can block and parry with it, and you can heal other people as well as you can disrupt Zeds. This one actually is really good on Survivalists too. It's probably S tier for them as well. I kind of forgot to mention the Road Redeemer there. It's also probably D tier for Survivalists. It's not very good. But yeah, this one is just really strong, mostly because it fits with any loadout, and it complements any loadout. So even if you want to be full range Zerker, this one's a great option just to take so that you can block and parry and then disrupt large waves if there is things that just swarm you like crawlers. It's really good there. Then we've got the Zweihander, another DLC weapon. This one hits pretty hard. It has long reach, it does high heavy attack damage, it has a stab, it has a slash. Zweihander is really cool. I like it, although it is a bit heavy, a little bit clunky, but I mean, you pair it with the nail gun or the hemoclobber and it's pretty good. You can throw upgrades into it and it scales really well with them, so I'm going to put it A tier. And it's probably not as good for Survivalists because mostly you're going to be taking it for like running around, so I'd probably say it's like B or C tier for them. The Pulverizer's up next. Pulverizer is another tier 3. This one hits pretty hard. This one clears up flesh pounds really easy. Its heavy attack is amazing. Has a big explosion that just kills everything in an area. It does explosive damage, which is nice. Block and parry's good. Light attack kind of sucks because the Pulverizer's kind of weird with its stunning ability. It seems to take precedent over just damaging an enemy or outright killing them. So sometimes you'll just smack an enemy, which you should kill, and they'll just get stunned and fall over, and then you have to hit them again when they're on the floor. The light attack's inconsistent, but the heavy attack's actually pretty good. So I'm going to put this one A tier. I think it's really good for Berserker. It's also probably A tier for Survivalist. It's actually a really good option for Survivalists because you can have faster reloads with this. You can block and parry with it. It doesn't weigh too much at 6, so that's kind of nice. The explosive damage is nice, as well as it actually counts as an explosion radius, so you get an even bigger radius on Survivalist. Frost Fang is S tier. This one is a DLC weapon. It's a shotgun that can freeze. If you freeze something, you can swing the axe at it and you deal double damage. The axe already does pretty decent damage. You can block and parry with it. Since this does count as a melee weapon, you can run faster with it if you have it out with Berserker's level 5 perk, I believe, and with Survivalist's faster perk. It's actually S tier on Survivalist too. It's a fantastic weapon. Being able to freeze enemies is amazing for you and for the team. It does scale pretty well with upgrades too. It also doesn't cost very much. This is probably one of the best weapons for Berserker, especially if you want to do like a ranged Zerker build. Then we've got the Bone Crusher. The Bone Crusher is probably A tier. It is the best weapon for blocking and parrying with, or at least for blocking with. It's really good to turtle up with, and it hits pretty hard with its bash attack. Its heavy attacks are okay, its light attacks are pretty good. You can build it either way if you're going light or heavy attacks. It benefits from both. It can also block just a lot of stuff, like it can block Huskfire, it can block the Patriarch's minigun, it can block almost anything in the game. It's pretty crazy. Survivalist, it's okay too if you want to turtle up with. It's probably weaker on Survivalist, probably like B or C tier. Probably not as good as this one. Then we've got the Static Strikers, which these ones I've never been a huge fan of. I'm going to put them B tier. I think they can still be really good, and I know some people really love them, which I think is fair. They do okay damage per hit. They have a good heavy attack. Their heavy attack also has the EMP on it. If you put an EMP on something that isn't raging, say like a flesh pound, you can just keep pummeling it. That is really cool. But I've always felt like they feel strange to block and parry with, and just never really gotten super used to them over some of the other options that we have. Not too much to say there. They are pretty good on Survivalist too. You can block and parry and apply this EMP status effect all the same. Then we've got the Tesla Launcher. The Tesla Launcher is pretty good on Berserker. I'm going to put it A tier. I'm going to put it on the low end A tier. I think it's good. It does decent damage per shot. Its secondary fire fires out EMP grenades, which function the same way as your regular EMPs, although I think they do a little bit more damage on explosion, because it seems like you can kill small things a little bit quicker. This counts as microwave damage, which is really good for anything holding metal, which is basically all the bosses, so that's really good overall. On Survivalist, this one's not that great because it just weighs a lot and costs a lot. So it'd probably be like C tier on them, just not amazing. Then we have the Blood Sickle. Blood Sickle is kind of a weird one. I'm going to put this one up into A tier because I think it is pretty good, but man, does it function strange. You can switch its attack modes to where it's either a short attack or a long attack. With its long attack, it has one of the longest melee reaches out of anything in the game. Does do good damage per second, but its attack patterns are all weird since they're all diagonal slashes. Light attacks are kind of the same way. It does weigh a decent amount. It's kind of heavy. I wouldn't really recommend this on survivalist. It's just, it costs too much for what you're getting. I'd probably put it down in like B or C tier for them, but Berserker's pretty good. Eviscerator is pretty decent too. I'm going to put Eviscerator up into A tier because it's decent at range. It kills big things fairly quick. It can kill the smaller guys fairly fast as well. At secondary fire, you just use it like a chainsaw and just chop things up. Primary fire, you shoot out the saw blades that can chop things up and they can bounce around. You can pick them back up. It does do high damage with both of those. Its stab attack is decent. Its parry is actually really good. It's pretty nice to have a ranged option that also has a decent amount of melee and you can block with it. It's also not terrible on survivalist, but it's not one that I'd really recommend. I'd put it lower on survivalist, just because even though it's ranged and it's melee, it's not as good as something like the Frost Fang is. Ion Thruster is up next. I'm going to say this one's S tier. This one's amazing. You get the lightsaber, does high damage, doesn't weigh too much, has a really cool special attack where you have to wait for it to get charged to 100. You get this from just smacking things, blocking, parrying, hitting heavy attacks, whatever it might be. You build up charge once you hit 100, you hit reload, and you just swipe away everything in front of you. Does really high damage, knocks everything back. Its light attacks are good, its heavy attacks are good, its reach is good, it has a stab attack. Everything about it is just really solid on Berserker. It's probably one of the best melee-oriented weapons if you just want to be fighting up close. On Survivalist, it's weaker just because of how much it costs. I'd probably say it's A or B tier on them. And then we have the Battle Axe. Battle Axe is probably like C tier. Battle Axe just, it fills such a strange niche. It hits really hard, but it's really slow. It's also really heavy and it costs a lot. There's not really a reason to go for it on Berserker a lot of the time, especially if you have some of the weapons like the Ion Thruster, or even if you just wanted to get up close and hit things hard, you could go with the Pulverizer. The Battle Axe is just so strange. Its stab attack is decent. Light attacks kind of suck because you don't use them that often, and it doesn't really scale with upgrades because you can't upgrade it. And then our last weapon, or weapons, is the Piranha Pistol. One Piranha Pistol is pretty good on Berserker. This doesn't weigh very much. I'm going to say it's B tier. I think it's good. You can block and parry with it, which is pretty awesome for a ranged weapon. You can run faster with it. That's all really nice. It does scale well with upgrades. Two Piranha Pistols is even better. I would say this one's A tier. You get more damage per second. You can still block and parry with it. You can still pick up all your saw blades. Probably actually better than the Eviscerator in a lot of ways if you wanted to have a ranged option, although you could take two Piranha Pistols and Eviscerator if you really would like to and just have all the saw blades. That's pretty fun. I guess I didn't talk about these or the Battle Axe for Survivalist. Never take the Battle Axe for Survivalist. There's no reason to. It just weighs way too much and it costs too much. Piranha Pistols are good on them though. They do really high damage. They would still probably be like A tier because they're fairly cheap. You can still block and parry with them and run around quick with them, so they're fantastic. And this is probably where I'd put all the Berserker stuff right now. Next up we got Commando, so I gotta sort through some of these. Oh, I guess we can just grab the 9mm and toss it into D tier because we're never going to be using the 9mm on most of the classes unless it's early on into the game or it's late into the game where you just ran out of bullets. Early on it's really good for clearing up stuff, but later on not as much.